Okay, well, the name would be Michael Andre McCoy. I'm now an author, a songwriter, philosopher, a ufologist, and an internet archaeologist. I was awakened by the earthquake, like most people, and the damage that we suffered wasn't too severe. It knocked over a bunch of crates in the bedroom that my brother had comic books in, so it sent a few hundred comic books across the floor, and a dresser fell over on top of that, so we had to pick that up and slip and slide on the comic books to get out the door. We had a few dishes that broke inside the kitchen, and there was a couple of cracks in the stucco and a crack in the block wall in the back. We were technically, I lived not really in Sylmar, although I went to Sylmar High, not really in Pacoima or San Fernando. I lived in a gray zone. It was a no man's zone, so they gave us the opportunity to go to Sylmar High or San Fernando. I wanted to go to San Fernando. My parents said, you ain't going there to play football. You're going to Sylmar, which ended up being the better choice. So I ended up going to Sylmar High School. I got up. I decided rather than help my mother clean up, I was going to run around to one of my best friend's houses, Jeff Carter, and see what he was doing and how it tore up his house, if at all. So I went around there, which was only about a block and a half, 2 blocks away, and his mother answers the door, and she's got a gash on her forehead. And I said, is Jeff here? And she said, yeah, sure. And she let me in, and I go in, and Jeff is there. I said, hey, man, I want to go check out the school. What are you doing? He said, oh, man, I said, what happened to your mom's head? He says, she jumped up when the earthquake was going on to see if the kids were all right. And as she tried to rush out of her bedroom, the earthquake knocked her sideways, and she hit her head on the door jamb, and she's bleeding. So she gets to my bedroom door, and she opens it up, and she says, Jeff. And I'm laying there on the bed, and I don't respond. I said, why didn't you say something? He said, she said, are you alive? Are you alive? He says, I have the shelf over my head of my bed, and it had a rock on it about this big. And the rock fell off and hit me in the head. And I was so disgusted with myself, I just laid there and I didn't answer. I said to what kind of a dummy would put a big rock over his head? Are you an idiot or something? I said this to myself. What I actually said was, oh, I'm glad you're okay. Okay? So I said, let's go check out the school. So he got dressed and he said, let's jump in my Buick that's so loud you can hear it from 3 blocks away because it rumbled. And I said, no, the streets are all tore up, man. You don't want to take the car. We have to walk. He says, let's go. So we get in the car, got out of the car, and started walking because he could see there was damage everywhere and stuff in the streets. We walked about a block and a half over to Foothill Boulevard. On Foothill, to our right at that point, was what we called an old folks home. And apparently the earthquake tore it up pretty bad. They evacuated all the seniors from there. We didn't go there. We just looked down the street. We turned left and went up Foothill. They never rebuilt that after they demolished it. As we were walking up the street, we dropped F-bombs everywhere. We cursed more than we cursed in our whole lives. Oh, I can't believe it. So, and the sidewalks were buckled. The streets were torn up. We're walking up the street and we thought, oh, we got hit pretty hard. Until we got down to Sylmar. That's when we realized that we didn't get hit hard. I decided, let's go by Joyce's house. We walked back over that way. We saw houses that had separated from the front steps and were tilting back. They were jacked up, okay? We saw a lot of damage over that way that we didn't have. Their chimneys had fallen down. Their brick walls, block walls had fallen down. We didn't have too much of that in our neighborhood. So I get over to Joyce's house, and I don't remember which parent. It might have been both of them. They came to the door, and I said, can I speak to Joyce? They said, Joyce is cleaning up. You might want to come back later. To which I replied, it's because I'm black, huh? If I was white, no, I didn't say that. I said that to myself. What I really said is, okay. So I left, and we walked over to Sylmar High, and it was not open yet. So we jumped the fence, and we're walking around, Oh, man, it effed up our high school. Man, did you see that? All the sidewalks that got points and mountains on them, and the steps are crooked, and look at the overhangs are cracked, and we looked in some of the buildings, there are books and crap all over the floor. Man, this is jacked up. So we're walking, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes this woman with a guy, and looking back, I guess it was the girl's vice principal, Mrs. Johns, and she's got on high heel shoes. And she looks at us and says, "What are you kids doing here? This isn't safe. You're going to have to leave." So we say to her, at least I said, "Do you know who I am? I'm one of the VPs of the school. I'm a student body vice president. I got as much right to be here as you do, old lady. We're athletes. We can outrun any earthquake. You can't. You're going to wish we were here to save you when it falls on you." I said this to myself. What I really said is, "Yes, ma'am." And we walked out the front door, okay? So we're walking through Sylmar, looking at the damage and cursing. And we get down near McDonald's over on Reynolds. And McDonald's mysteriously had risen up somewhere 4 to 6 feet higher. So the parking lot that used to be level was now angled like this. I said, "Oh, they got jacked up. That's what you get for not hiring me when I applied a couple of months ago, forcing me to take a job with Walter Martin way over there in Burbank making pizzas. Papadino's Pizza. That's what you get. But next time you hire me," I didn't say that to myself, but I did say it. Okay, but at the same time, across the street, I got to tell you this, was a boys' market. Now, I am an honest person, but this is what made me so honest. A couple of months earlier, I was wearing some really nice blue slacks, and Walter and I had left the pizza place and stopped by Boys Market. While in there, I saw some blue socks that were perfect match for my blue pants, but I didn't have any money on me, and payday was 3 days, 4 days later on a Friday. So I decided, hey, I'll just stick these 89-cent socks in my pocket. As I was walking out the door, I feel a hand on my shoulder, and this guy, I don't know if he's a manager of security, says, "Hey, you got something in your pocket you didn't pay for?" I said, "No, sir, I left that sitting back over there." So I take off to the store, and he's in hot pursuit. And when I rounded the corner, I threw the socks on top of some toys. So when he comes down the corner, I said, "There they are right there." He says, "Yeah, right, okay. What's your name?" I said, "Why do you need my name? The socks are right there." He says, "What's your name?" I said, "Michael McCoy, Esquire." So he's writing down Michael McCoy, Esquire, sock thief, and I'm humiliated. And Walter's standing there like, "Dude, I can't believe you did that." So when we get outside, he says, "You gotta leave and don't come back in this store for the next 2-3 years. I better not see your face in here." I said, "Yes, sir." Walter said, "I would have given you $1 for the socks." I said, "Man, I don't know what I was thinking." And that's the last thing, really, the last thing I ever stole. I determined at that moment I sucked as a thief, and I never tried stealing anything again the rest of my life, okay? But this is Earthquake Day, and I look over at Boys Market, and it had fallen in a freaking hole. And I said, "That's what you get next time you let me have the stupid socks. I don't want to come in your store, and nobody else is coming in." I said this to myself. What I really was saying was, I sure hope that paper with my piece of paper with my name on it gets thrown in the trash so I don't have a permanent record. Okay? So after that, we walked back down the street. We didn't have water. We had a mess, and I didn't want to clean anything up. But at the same time, Sylmar High did reopen. The freeway they were trying to build did finally open up. And that's basically what happened to me on Earthquake Day.
But you know, you talk about the grocery stores. I worked at a grocery store. I told you that, and a lot of people were thinking, okay, it's like when there's a riot or whatever, or a community is destroyed by a quake or whatever. They're not going to get groceries for a while, so you know, some people do loot stores or whatever. When you went back home, I mean, you guys had to think like we did. Where are we going to get groceries? There's nothing open. Did you have to deal with that too?
Yeah, we had to deal with it. We did most of our shopping over that way towards the Pacoima area. There was a Safeway over there and some other market my mother went to occasionally, which was right next to the candy store. I had a horrible candy fetish as a child. I even did at San Fernando Junior. And my mom had a beauty salon next to the grocery store, but the grocery store was closed for a while. I remember that up on one of the streets, might have been Glen, but over that way in towards San Fernando Sumar, they had a well of some kind that said you could come get free water. And I remember that distinctly, but I don't really know how we survived. We had good parents back in the day that actually took care of their families, and I had a father and a mother in the house, like most of the people I grew up with, and they took care of us, and we didn't starve or anything. And they tried to clean up pretty fast, but being away from Sylmar helped. You know, that's a mile and a half, 2 miles down, and no matter how much complaints we had, if we walked over to Sylmar, we said we were lucky. Just live with it.
I know that one of the first things that happened was there was no phone service, so you couldn't call anybody. And also, a lot of people shut off their gas. And well, you mentioned the water, because I know the well in San Fernando, everybody went over there because they could get water, because water pipes were busted and that kind of stuff, and water was shut off. Couldn't use the toilets or anything like that, which was kind of a mess too.
We could use toilets and things like that, although our water was shut off for a while. We went over to San Fernando. We thought it was not hilarious, but interesting that they were doing that, because we were one of the ones that first got cut back on, only because we weren't literally closer to the actual earthquake itself that tore up everything. So, like I said, our walls didn't fall down. But when I was in Sylmar, I saw lots of walls. We had a chimney. It didn't fall down. So life returned to our area a little bit quicker than it did to San Fernando, and San Fernando probably before Sylmar. But I remember they were building that nice freeway for us, which was very interesting. I don't know if you ever got on it. There was to get from, I guess it was the 10 or something, over to the Foothill Freeway. And we were so happy when they were making it. And it got delayed, as did the construction over in Sylmar on the upper levels. They stopped building the houses and such. And they stopped, and when they came back, they didn't put an off-ramp in Pacoima. Now, we thought this was a freeway for us, okay? So when it shut down, we weren't that disturbed, because we knew it was going to open back up sooner or later. But they let us off at San Fernando Road, which was in San Fernando. Nothing stopped in Pacoima. It swerved around and caught the other freeway, Foothill Freeway, and then you couldn't get back on and off until you got to San Fernando. So we were a little bit upset, but that was life. That's the way it was. And my father had to explain to us they actually built this freeway ramp to keep them from having to go through Pacoima to get to San Fernando. So it was wonderful.
Well, you know, and that's was common practice. Like Tulsa had the same thing, where when they built the freeway, it went around the black community. It had no off ramps, because they didn't want people getting off and on in the black community, and that was planned that way. And it's interesting you mentioned the what about Sylmar, because I never realized that. But thinking back, you have to get off at Paxton, where Paxton Liquor is or was. You had to go down the freeway. You had to make the bend. You couldn't. There was no off ramp right there. And you're right. All the off ramps were. It was between Handsome Dam, which was I forget the name of the street, and the next one would have been in San Fernando at McClay. So Pacoima had no off ramps, which was an interesting point that you bring up. I'm glad you did. You know, they
obviously didn't ask any of us where we wanted an off ramp. So we got what we got.
I'm interested. You know, one of the things, the first thing you thought of when the Earth started shaking, I know my first thought was nuclear attack. That was the very first thing I thought of. And I said, I'd just roll over and die in bed. And I've heard several people say similar things. What was your first thought when you started bouncing around? Because it was at 6:02 in the morning, you know, and I got up for school like at 6:30. I don't know what time you got up.
Oh, I was still on the bed at the time it happened. I said, this looks like something Bob did. No, I didn't say that. What I said was, this is a mess. How do you do a drop drill and get under the bed with comic books all over the floor and everything piled on top of each other? So I didn't panic that much. Somebody swore that my next door neighbor ran out of the house naked. I don't believe it. That's one of those myths, okay? Because I looked for naked people and I didn't see any. But it was scary because I never experienced anything quite like it. As a side event, as you know, I took off that summer and moved to Detroit to run track at Wayne State University, okay? When I got there, I'm going through the first winter time, and they looked at me and said, aha, you're from that San Fernando, you're from over there, Southern California. You moved here because of the earthquake. I said, let me be perfectly honest with you. The earthquake lasted 20, 25 seconds. Your winters go on for months. The salt's eating the bottom of my car. I'm slipping and sliding up and down the street, afraid I'm going to have an accident. My father's waking me up an hour earlier to shovel the snow out of the driveway. I'll take the earthquake. Because this crap goes on, and you guys don't know when to stop. Winter is just 20 degrees cooler. That's it. I'm a Southern California boy. They also told me you need to put antifreeze in your car, which is why it keeps overheating. I'm going, it's cold outside. Why would I want to put coolant in my car? I'm driving every 2-3 miles and having to put more water in. They said, you're not in Southern California anymore, Michael. It's cold outside. The water freezes. I'm in a foreign world. I don't know what the heck they're talking about. Give me the earthquake, please. I can't take it. After 2 years of the track scholarship, I gave it up. You know, I did really well and moved back to Southern Cal. I couldn't handle it.
You know, since then, I mean, you know, we think about what you've learned from that experience, and you just talked about the Detroit thing. That was a good learning experience. 94, we had another earthquake, Northridge. We're going to have more. You know, we know that the big one at some point will happen. What have you learned from that earthquake, either to prepare for future earthquakes or what not to do in a future earthquake?
One of the things I learned, which astonished me, because I was living in Atlanta. My mother had had a stroke. I came out and took care of her for 9.5 years. And I actually had the mother of my children pregnant with my child living there. And she says, everything is messed up. Everything's torn up. She said, you know where you used to work over there in Harlem? I said, the freeway, Santa Monica freeway collapsed. I said, what do you mean? She says, it collapsed. I go, oh man, that's a major thoroughfare. It's going to take forever for life to get back to normal in that area. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, they opened up the freeway. I said, wait a minute. It takes 6 months to a year and a half to build a bridge for a freeway. And they said, no, they offered them a monetary incentive, and they did it that quick. I said, you mean to tell me that when you work for the government, you take as long as you possibly can to get the work done, but if they offer you more money, you can actually do it in 1/3 the time or less? They said, yes. That was the number one lesson I learned, because we had a freeway collapse here, and I kept telling everybody, it's not going to take 3-4 months like they're telling you. It's a major thoroughfare. They can do it in a couple of weeks, and they did. But I never knew that was possible until I actually witnessed it. And then I said, oh, that's how it works. The lesson I learned from an earthquake, one of the things you learn is that no matter where you live in America, possibly even in the world, there's something out there that can get you. It can be a hurricane, it can be a tornado, it can be, Jesus Christ, drought, okay? Something can come and wipe you out. And we as Americans say, I know what to do. I'll run to the store and I'll stock up on toilet paper or anything else I can get my hands on, because that's what you do. All the water and toilet paper you can possibly put in your house. And you come to learn that that doesn't work very well, because you end up with toilet paper for the next 2 years stored away. But we don't know what to do in an emergency situation. And sometimes I wonder if the government knows what to tell us to do in an emergency situation. So you have to be self-reliant. Ever since that day, I've always had a little bit of extra this, that, and the other. I've always had a first aid kit. I've always changed the way I look at something could get us, okay? I don't know what, but you can't move away from it, because they just have a different disaster waiting for you. Fires, okay? Something can get you. So always be prepared. Try to have a car that's got gas in it. Try to have an escape plan or something with that long. And we go through life thinking, life is wonderful, beautiful. I'm sure that my girls, before this pandemic and everything started, that's the way they looked at the world. Now they're looking at the world from different eyes. You never know. You never know. And we don't. So just be prepared the best you can and don't panic. Panic doesn't get you anywhere.
Ed, do you have any questions for Michael?
No, I don't.
Sorry, it's talking me up. Well, I know you talked about how it affected your philosophy in terms of always being prepared. Because part of your intro just really got me. So, how did this affect your life in other ways? Not just in terms of like how you handle disasters, but did it like affected you I mean, you're a UFOologist. How did that happen? I mean, or is that? I'm just always curious about like these incidents in people's life, which kind of sets them on a different path than what they do later. If that makes any sense.
What happened to me there, that is kind of an interesting story. Woke up here in Georgia in a sweat, and I said, what the heck just happened? And I was saying that wasn't a dream because I remember it vividly, and I don't remember dreams worth a dime 5 minutes, 2 minutes after I wake up. And I was given information that I said, I don't want to believe this because the information I was given was bizarre. What I was told by ETs, okay, one named okay, he said, you guys were brought here. And I said, yes, sure, we evolved here. He said, no, you weren't, you were brought from other planets. I have spent the last 40 plus years trying to disprove the information he gave me, and I can't. Back then, I swore to everybody, look, I was abducted. This is what happened. And everybody was looking at me sideways like, yeah, right. And I said, okay, as I write the first book, The Anti-Truth, I'm going to defer to a dream. I'll let you think it's a dream. The further away I get away from what happened to me, now I'll say, okay, possibly it was a real dream. But back then, I was convinced because I was given too much information. It made too much sense, and I knew where it happened, okay? So I started delving into being a ufologist, as I had mentioned to Bob. That is a head of the Olmec, and the Olmec were everybody assumed an African tribe that had moved over from Africa and civilized the Mayans and the Aztecs, taught them how to build pyramids. All of a sudden, these huge multi-ton heads were there, about 20 of them, all over the place. They moved them 20-something miles over hills and valleys and all kinds of stuff to La Venta, Mexico. And I said, but you see that? There isn't one of them in Africa. So if these people were from Africa, there'd be some of these heads in Africa. Another thing is they got the Aluma ball courts, which are a hoop that were like 15, 20 feet above the ground, and you had to knock a ball through it with your hip, which meant you'd be there the rest of your life trying to do it. But that was brought over by them. Another thing was they built the pyramids and they civilized them, taught them agriculture. I said, but these things aren't found in sub-Saharan West Coast Africa. So they can't be from Africa because there's none of this stuff in Africa. They're from somewhere else. The people that lived there in La Venta area said they just showed up one day. We don't know how they got here. They didn't have big sailing ships or anything. They just showed up. They taught us how to do all this stuff, build pyramids and everything, and then they disappeared. Over on this side, there's a Dogon statue. The Dogon statue is a tribe that lives in, I want to say Mali, and they said, no, we're not originally from here. We're from, there's a planet in a star system up there called Sirius. And I'm reading this stuff and I'm going, okay, they said, there's more than one. There's a Sirius A and a Sirius B. With very powerful telescopes, we finally said, they were right. They said there's also some rings around one of the planets. They said, but you can't see Saturn from here. How do you know this? They said, we know this because that's what we were told. The same people that told us how we got here. I said, okay. That other little statue there is called a Dogo from Japan. They dug it up a while back, 100 years ago, and they said, hey, there's a whole bunch of these things. Why are they wearing spacesuits if these things were made thousands of years ago? And the current Japanese go, we didn't make them. They're just here. So the more I delved into ufology, I'm one of the biggest skeptics in the world. I have a site, okay, Alien Insights Group. And when people come on there, it's amazing to me how much history we don't know. We take everything for granted. One of the things we took for granted is, how did North America get populated? So I get these people that say North America was populated because there was an ice bridge between Russia and Alaska. And then they said, no, that didn't happen like that, and they never could have crossed it, not thinking that it's only like 600 miles, but there's 1,000 miles in each direction that were frozen solid. So looking at that, I started delving more and more and more into this UFO thing. And the more I delved into it, the deeper I looked, the more sense it made. And so I've written books. The last book, Ending Eden, we are living with something we know is not the truth, but we don't know where to look to get verification. So as a wise man once said, for those who believe, no evidence, no additional evidence is necessary. For those who disbelieve, no amount of evidence is enough. Okay? So I tell everybody, look into it for yourself. You're going to find things. They tell you the pyramids are 4,500 years old. Now they're trying to tell you, no, the pyramids are not 4,500 years old. They tell you the pyramids were built by the Egyptians. The Egyptians go, well, yeah, they go, well, how'd you build them? What do you mean? There are 2.3 million blocks that encompass the pyramid. Yeah? You're telling me you moved 2.3 million 5-ton blocks 20 miles away and stacked them one every 7 minutes to build this pyramid? No, you didn't. You had help. Okay? There's Machu Picchu, there's Pumapunku, there are all over places all over the globe where you take one look at it and you go, Sacsayhuaman, okay? They were moving 150-ton blocks, standing them upright and carving them in the weirdest shapes in the world, but they're seamless where you can't even put a piece of paper in between the blocks. And you go, they didn't move that 200-ton block of granite over here over a mountain. They had help. The same thing applies to Eastern Island. They said, how'd you guys get those statues lined up on the shoreline? And Eastern Island, they said, well, they walked. The legend is the statues walked to the shoreline. So the scientists said, that's ridiculous. They must have done it with ropes and they're pulling back and forth. And the other scientists came along and said, there is no indication whatsoever that these things were wobbled along the way, because it would have destroyed the bottom of and that didn't happen. We don't know how they did it, but they didn't walk. There's evidence everywhere, but if you don't want to see it, you want to go into denial mode, you're welcome to do that. I'm a skeptic too. I don't blame you. All I can do is keep compiling the evidence, putting it on the site, and I will gladly entertain any questions about it that there are.
If I got one final question of the quick. That sure. Is, are you amazed that 50 years later, you can remember in such detail what happened that day?
Yeah, because as most people understand, we're at this age where they want to say your cognitive abilities are slipping. And as I say to my brother once in a while, no, there are events that happened to you when you were a child that you don't forget, okay? And as a philosopher, one of the things I also try to explain from that is sometimes we imagine something and say, I lived before because, and I said, perhaps there's a gene that's passed down, just like the color of your eyes, the shape of your face, your height, the color of your skin, and maybe it's a memory gene, and you're remembering some other life. Or perhaps we're on the same frequency as some person that lived before, and in the afterlife they can communicate on some level, or we're picking up prior transmissions or vibrations, and we get that and we think it's us, okay? Our minds are wonderful things, but as human beings, they are probably the most skewed, ridiculous things on this planet. I keep telling people we can't be from this planet. No other animal on the planet cooks food, wears dead animal skins, builds elaborate houses or artwork, writes books, reads and writes. We're so different from anything else on the planet. If we came from apes, why can't they talk? Okay, we didn't come from apes, okay? We didn't come from Neanderthals. Now the scientists are saying, nope, we told you that before, but it's not true. Our brains correlate, grab hold of information, and lock onto it. so that I remember something before we even moved from Atlanta when I was 3, 4 years old. And I remember it to this day. My brother's throwing a hat up in the tree. Okay. And you go, there are events that are traumatic or semi-traumatic events. You can say something to somebody in elementary school. You're ugly because this, or your ears are too big, or you're too short. And they will remember that to the day they die. But the teacher will tell them in 1892, and they will forget that the next day and never remember it again. So our minds lock onto traumatic events. The earthquake was special. It was a traumatic event. It shook us to the core inside, and intellectually, we're still going, what happened? What happened? How did that happen? What do you mean the tectonic plates moved against each other? What are you talking about? All I know is the house was shaking, and I hope it doesn't happen again. Now that people, I talk to cousins and family that live in California now, they go, yeah, we had a little earthquake. They don't even care, okay? And aftershock was in there, yeah, because they don't expect to die. At that time, we didn't know. The biggest fear we had in 1971 is that was bad. What if an even bigger one happens? We're screwed forever. We're lucky if everybody doesn't die. Jeff had an uncle that was supposed to be in the VA hospital working. The earthquake woke him up. He swore to our faces, I was late for work that morning. If I'd been there, I'd be dead. A bunch of people died in the VA hospital. And he swore, I'd be dead if I had been there. So it was traumatic, but it was survivable. And you come to find out slowly but surely, all of life is that way, okay? All of life is traumatic and survivable and wonderful at the same time. So let's not take it for granted.